I'm non-zero-sum James, your companion on this exploration of win-win games.
Emergence Spirals. What Yudkowski gets wrong about emergence. Before proposing the following ideas and critiquing those of Yudkowski, I want to acknowledge that I'm no expert in this area, simply a committed and somewhat rigorous speculator. This is not meant as a smackdown of a post written 18 years ago, but rather a broadening of the discussion, offering new, more quantifiable measures of emergence. In his 2007 post, The Futility of Emergence, Elizier Yudkowski argues that the term emergence is used vaguely and misleadingly, as a mysterious explanation rather than a real one. After the answer of why emergence is given, the phenomenon is still a mystery and possesses the same sacred impenetrability it had at the start. He critiques the tendency to describe complex macroscopic patterns like consciousness or whirlpools as if they have independent causal power, when in reality they are just predictable consequences of underlying mechanisms. Where large-scale patterns can be reduced to their component interactions, Yudkowski suggests we should focus on these underlying mechanisms. On this blog, we care about explaining complexity without resorting to mysticism or reductionist dismissal. Curious people want to see the deeper patterns that shape real systems, so we can make sense of the world and reason more effectively. But in our series on emergence, I've leaned heavily on the idea of emergent complexity to make sense of phenomena that are reducible to underlying mechanisms. I disagree with Yudkowski that this need be misleading or vague. This post, as usual, will take a cross-disciplinary view, drawing from systems theory, science, history, and philosophy. So let's get specific. Not everything is emergent. I agree with Yudkowski that it is possible to overuse the term and apply it to anything that emerges from underlying mechanisms. So it's important to distinguish what does and doesn't qualify as emergent. I'd like to make the case that emergent complexity is where a whole system is more complex than the sum of its parts, and where a system is more closely aligned with a macroscopic phenomenon than with its component parts. So, when we look at an eye, we see that this tender ball can be understood as fitting the purpose of producing a picture of the physical world. Microscopically, though, it is a configuration of cells, just like a big toe or a testicle. But macroscopically, it is more like a camera. On the other hand, the majority of phenomena that emerge from a system aren't emergent, in that they do not add complexity, but rather decrease it, consistent with the second law of thermodynamics. Take the traffic system, for instance. This creates heat and noise, increasing entropy. Heat and noise are properties of the system, but they are not emergent properties of the system. Emergent systems are identified by their apparent inverse relationship to entropy. Convergence. The traffic system creates noise and heat, which, as we have discussed, do not qualify as emergent properties. But it also creates a level of friction and inefficiency which leads to roading measures that eventually make the roading system more efficient. This will predictably happen because inefficiency is a constant pressure on the system to change in a particular direction. So we have a series of graphs that help visualize these patterns of emergence, these spirals. So if you'd like to see those, they're on the post, linked in the description. So we have the physical environment, traffic runs into friction, then we reroute to create a new road system. Now one could say that these changes are the result of the collective decisions of intelligent individuals, and are therefore not genuinely emergent. That is, until we see the same patterns of efficiency echo throughout nature, independent of intelligence, specifically in the nutrient pathways of slime molds. They start with the physical environment, they want to transport nutrients, but run into friction, then they reroute, which creates a more efficient system of pathways. When searching for food in a sparse environment, the slime mold, Physarum polycephalum, naturally forms networks of protoplasmic tubes that connect nutrient sources with astonishing efficiency. Studies have even revealed that the slime mold's network design can closely resemble the layout of the Tokyo rail system. There's an illustration for this in the post. Convergent evolution. It is said that the eye has developed independently in more than 20 different species. This is due to the supreme benefit of vision for the survival and reproduction of species and the transmission of those genes. If we take Yudkowski's perspective, emergent phenomena are merely reducible to the component parts and are therefore not real in any meaningful sense, then aren't we wrong to call these 20 plus varieties eyes at all, or to call what they do seeing, because they are made of entirely different components? It is the fact that we recognize them on a macroscopic scale converging on a common function that it makes sense to call them eyes. The same is true of other convergent phenomena, like the slime mold and traffic systems. Nature answers questions. This convergence is a phenomenon that is best understood from a macroscopic perspective, as an answer to the question, what is the most efficient system of pathways for slime mold and traffic, or what physical objects are in my vicinity for vision? These questions can be answered by various different systems. Design? At this point, it's important to note that a system answering a question or fitting a macroscopic scaffold or a specified function is a teleological perspective that might seem to suggest design, a top-down force determining the shape of a system. And this might be an interpretation Yudkowski wants to avoid altogether, giving it a wide berth by denying the macroscopic view of a system. But this is unnecessary caution. We can acknowledge macroscopic systems, a top-down perspective, without denying their microscopic bottom-up origins. We understand that the emergent system of evolution gives an illusion of design. It doesn't require the existence of a designer. One might say that the design process itself is actually an emergent outcome of neural activity, analogous to evolution anyway. So even design isn't really design. In the cases mentioned so far, the function of the system means that it is more closely aligned with a macroscopic phenomenon than its component parts. The slime mold is aligned with the same macroscopic structure as the traffic system. The eye is aligned with the physical environment, rather than the complicated configuration of the cells, neurons, and electrical signals that comprise the system itself. This recognition of convergence is a confirmation of emergence. I'd like to make the case that a good measure of whether a system is emergent is not whether it is irreducible, no system is provably irreducible, but that something can be described as emergent when it has completed an emergent cycle, in that it has taken a system, the substrate, and through exposure to some friction in the system, reliably generated a new phenomenon which reaches an equilibrium, which now creates a substrate or niche for something new to emerge. So we have system 1 enables a new niche, that comes up against friction, it adapts, which leads to system 2, which then goes through the cycle again. Now, I realize this is getting pretty complicated. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking if you're listening to this, maybe you're getting a little lost. If you go on the site and look at the pictures, I feel like it's clearer. So, to continue with the traffic and slime mold examples, once a system has reached a reliable state of efficiency, then it becomes a substrate or niche for a new emergent cycle on top. We start with transport, runs into friction, slow, risky transport rerouting leads to roading, which enables a new transport niche, and commerce. This runs into friction, individual delivery, rerouting, and batched services becomes a postal service, which enables a new transport niche, information. Friction, inefficient physical movement of information gets rerouted through wires, which becomes telecommunications, which creates a new niche, which runs into more friction, which leads to the internet, another system of transportation for data. Think of all the entirely new industries this spawned: e-commerce, web design, citizen journalism, influencers, even AI, and round it goes. This is the emergence spiral. Similarly, the slime mold has been found to have developed primitive farming symbiosis. This comes from nature. Instead of consuming all bacteria in their patch, they stop feeding early and incorporate bacteria into their fruiting bodies. Then they carry bacteria during spore dispersal and can sow a new food crop, which is a major advantage if edible bacteria are lacking in the new site. So we have an efficient system of pathways, which gives us easy access to nutrients. Then we come into the friction of overconsumption. Then we have artificial limits put on consumption, which creates the bacterial farming system. So this is another cycle, and this is not unique to slime molds. According to nature, there is a striking convergent evolution between bacterial husbandry in social amoebas and fungus farming in social insects. Efficient system of pathways, easy access to fungus, friction, overconsumption, artificial limits on consumption become a fungal farming system. And again, round the spiral goes. Again, we see convergence as a confirmation of emergence. Specifically, that an emergent cycle has taken place. The emergent cycle. The way I see it, the emergent cycle has a specific structure that we see all around us in nature. We begin with a stable system, but stable systems exist in a world with friction. So at some point, they are pathologically disturbed by some constant friction, driving the system out of balance, and it either dies or finds a new equilibrium, which incorporates the disturbance, becoming the substrate for a new phenomenon. There are a few ways we can look at how friction is incorporated. 1. Adaptation. The whole system changes to create a novel system. 2. Symbiosis. The original system and pathology develop harmony. 3. Hierarchy. The pathology becomes a new phenomena dependent on the original system. I see emergence as the third category. Not mere adaptation or symbiosis, but layers of increasing complexity, each dependent on the one below it. So when we look at the idea of viruses, we start off with a host species. This enables a new virus, creates an environment that runs into friction, and then we have natural selection, which creates an immune system in the species, and the virus adapts as well. A realm that develops in cycles is immunity. In The Red Queen, Matt Ridley explains that not only can our immune system develop a memory of antibodies against diseases we've faced in our lifetime, but that sexual selection allows for a genetic memory, where resistance to certain diseases can be held dormant in our genes and rediscovered more efficiently when faced with the same threat generations later. Our genetic memory of history can help us better deal with the echoes of history. This cumulative cycle takes the form of a spiral, allowing for a new layer to be built atop the established substrate. The emergent spiral. Now, if we look at the canonical example of emergence, evolution by natural selection, we have something that can be generally adaptive rather than hierarchical, the feedback loop that increases capacity. Brains create intelligence, competition with other brains creates a communication arms race, which increases the capacity of our brains. This is more an adaptive situation because one species does not become the substrate for a new phenomenon. But often evolution yields hierarchical results, generating an emergent spiral. Brains create intelligence that comes into competition with other brains, creating a communication arms race, which adapts into language. Here we see an entirely different paradigm. Language emerge on top of an intelligent species. Language is categorically different from the biological species it is derived from, but it is dependent on it. This is an emergent phenomenon. But this emergent spiral doesn't only manifest in nature. These spirals are ubiquitous across different realms. As I've had this in the back of my head for a while, I've experienced the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon on many occasions. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon is once you become aware of something, you notice it everywhere around you. So I've been noticing parallels to philosophy, history, science, and other fields. History repeats. I think the clearest one comes from Hegel, ironically because Hegel is famously inscrutable. Hegel's dialectic concerned how a concept, particularly one exists in the messy real world of history, holds internal contradictions that will ultimately lead to internal conflict and the transformation of the concept into something richer. It is commonly simplified in the form of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So we have a cycle. The thesis comes into conflict with the friction of the antithesis, and then it adapts with the synthesis, which brings us to a new thesis. Hegel's classic model maps the evolution of political ideology and philosophical schools throughout history. It goes, simplistic ideas are vulnerable to argument, friction, and so they are forced to adapt, sometimes landing on entirely new paradigms. When a new paradigm gets ingrained and inflexible, It then falls victim to a type of Goodhart's law, which we've dealt with in another episode, becoming vulnerable to radical new ideas. Although Hegel's model looks like a cycle, it is actually a spiral, as it refers to history, which moves chronologically. History repeats, but if we record and remember the lessons of history, cycles don't need to fall back exactly on themselves. Then let's look at scientific discovery. In the realm of science, Karl Popper has a related cycle regarding intellectual discovery, which he formalizes as P1 to TT to EE to P2. In Popper's intellectual autobiography, Unended Quest, he holds that the accumulation of knowledge follows a similar loop to Hegel's. You begin with a problem, P1, develop a tentative theory, TT, then eliminate errors in that theory, EE, through the scientific method and peer review, etc., creating a new equilibrium. And until we come up with a genuine theory of everything, the loose ends of that theory will inevitably lead to friction and a new problem, P2. Unlike our cycle, Popper starts at the problem, but shift everything forward and you have the same cycle. Popper also draws parallels between inorganic physics, biology, and intellectual discovery. Popper refers to organisms as problem-solving structures. My sense is that creative processes, whether by nature or design, follow this pattern. Returning to Yudkowski. Now that we have a sense of emergent cycles, what they are and what they are not, looking in detail at Yudkowski's criticisms, we see that his target is not actually emergence, as I understand it at least. Yudkowski asserts, gravity arises from the curvature of spacetime, according to the specific mathematical model of general relativity. Here Yudkowski lampoons the case that gravity is an emergent property of the curvature of spacetime, and he is right to do so, but only because of the way he has formed the argument. Gravity does not emerge from the curvature of spacetime. Gravity is the curvature of spacetime. General relativity requires the existence of mass for this model. It does not explain how mass exists. Theories of emergent gravity, like the one I've explored in Graviton, target how mass itself arises and the resulting gravitational effects, rather than how gravity can be modelled. Yudkowski also takes aim at intelligence. I have lost track of how many times I have heard people say intelligence is an emergent phenomenon, as if that explained intelligence. I would argue the description of something as emergent doesn't explain what something is, rather it fits it to a recognizable structure that can help us understand it better. By recognizing the natural selection of neurons through the environment of stimulus, we can understand it by analogy to evolution, another emergent cycle that intelligence itself rests upon, and it then no longer possesses the same sacred impenetrability it had at the start. Is emergence magic? Yudkowski extends this somewhat uncharitable reading of emergence into full strawman when he equates emergence with magic, and I think this helps to pinpoint the key concern he has when looking at the idea of emergent phenomena. I share this concern, that emergence gives you a sacred mystery to worship. Emergence is popular because it is the junk food of curiosity. You can explain anything using emergence, and so people do just that, for it feels so wonderful to explain things. As mentioned, I think this caution against attributing the properties of systems to design, or magic in this case, is unnecessary. We can understand phenomena in macroscopic terms like function, purpose, as a solution to a problem or an answer to a question, and we can recognize alignment with other macroscopic phenomena by analogy without denying the microscopic nature of causality. Emergence is a way of understanding complex systems that acknowledges that complexity arises out of particular sets of simple rules in a way that seems wondrous, even magical, but is, by definition, not magical. So, I don't doubt some people do use emergence in a way to curtail their own curiosity and hand-wave over more complex and nuanced and effortful engagement with the world around us. But I don't see this as the purpose of emergence as a term. I see the term as a way of aligning our understanding of something novel that we might not yet fully comprehend with other macroscopic phenomena that we do comprehend, in the same way that a polymath might cross-pollinate between different fields of study. By understanding emergence as a series of cycles that emerge from friction, reach equilibrium, and become a substrate for the next cycle, we can better respond to or cater to the needs of that system, seeing the forest despite the trees. This one pushed the boat out quite a long way, and I'll appreciate that it might have gone too far. Hopefully some of you followed it and are there with me still at the end. We'll get back to some more feet on the ground material very soon.